Well, there's certainly a lot of political news to talk about. Right now, let's go ahead and bring in Ed O'Keefe, CBS News senior White House and political correspondent. Ed, good to see you. Let's talk a little bit first about the Wyoming primary. Liz Cheney, she's up for re-election. She's been an outspoken opponent of former President Donald Trump. And if the polls are any indication, she will likely lose by a big margin tonight against a Trump-backed challenger. So we're wondering here, what kind of impact do you think that will have in Congress and more specifically on the January 6th commission, which she's part of?
Well, the committee will continue through the end of the year regardless, no matter whether she wins or not. But what tonight's going to do is once again reiterate the former president's continued iron grip on the Republican Party and his ability to go into states and essentially find somebody far more loyal to him, tell the base that she or he is, and get them to vote for him or her. In this case, Harriet Hageman was somebody back in 2016 who actually campaigned against Donald Trump. She was a supporter of Ted Cruz and tried to get him off the ballot at the convention, but now has transformed herself into a big Trump supporter in Wyoming and is likely going to win the congressional primary tonight. If Cheney were to somehow pull it off, it would have been by convincing Democrats and independents to participate in Wyoming's open Republican primary, and she's raised millions of dollars from people all over the country, not just Republicans, Democrats and independents as well, which leaves a lot of us wondering what might be next for her. Would she consider running for president in 2024 as a Republican or an independent? Would she consider running some kind of organization designed to stop Donald Trump from getting the GOP nomination again? In essence, the political world could be her oyster, and she'll try to sort that out in the wake of whatever happens tonight in Wyoming.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are going to be keeping a close eye on that to see exactly, like you mentioned, which route she decides to take. Let's talk a little bit about former President Trump, because obviously he has been in the news with the FBI searching his Florida home. He's facing legal issues in New York as well. But despite all of that, Ed, talk a little bit about the influence that he still has on the GOP in Washington and in races like we see in Wyoming. Is it as strong as it was when he left office, you think?
It may, in some ways, can be stronger, especially in the wake of what's transpired in the last week, because you so quickly saw Republican leaders and candidates across the country come to his defense, rally to his side, question what the FBI was doing, even stoke misinformation and calls for violence against FBI agents and other law enforcement, unfortunately. But that just shows you the grip he has on the party. And again, month after month, primary after primary across the country, we've seen that when he endorses somebody, they usually win. And in the states where it didn't happen, ironically, it's in battleground states that he may have lost or struggled to hold on to in 2020. And that's what gives so many Republicans pause about the future of the GOP and whether he should be the nominee, is that while he's got this strong base of support and has elected officials on the ballot this year, certainly in his pocket, at least publicly, is that what's best for the party going into a general election season when Democrats and independents, of course, also vote and don't have favorable views of him? You've got several different contests across the country where you need independent voters to win, and independent voters don't necessarily like him. So there will be a big test of his continued political power in November with midterm elections all across the country. But for now, at least, he's got a firm grip on the party, and there's nobody else really able to chip away at that, at least not yet.
Well, Ed, all of that, of course, brings us to the presidential race in 2024. So I'm going to ask you to look into your crystal ball here, because I know you have one, right? Will Trump try to avenge? You think Trump's going to try and avenge the 2020 loss? President Biden, you think he'll go for a second term? What are you hearing? What do you think?
Well, it's not about what we think and what the crystal ball may say. It's what these guys are saying. And both of them are saying or hinting that they're going to run again. Legally, they can't do that until they're ready to actually establish the organization that can raise money for them and employ staff. But both are making preparations to do it again. So will we see a sequel of 2020? I mean, right now, that appears to be the way we're headed. But August 2022, it might as well be decades from August 2024 and November 2024, when both or one, either of them may be or may not be on the ballot. But here at the White House, certainly, they quietly anticipate and prepare for a Biden 2024 run. You talk to Trump associates that have met with him, or that work with him, they say he's made up his mind. He will announce what his mind is, either some point before or immediately after the midterm elections. The issue for him in announcing early would be that he is currently the steward of hundreds of millions of dollars raised that officially, at least, are supposed to be spent on behalf of other Republican candidates. congressional races and gubernatorial races. If he were to announce his presidential campaign, he'd lose control of that money that he raised in goodwill for the Republican Party and might leave a lot of guys holding the bag, in essence, and unable to afford their races. So he can't do anything about it until probably right after that. Either way, for now at least, a sequel looks likely. But as we know, things have a way of changing quickly in American politics.
Yeah, they sure do. I want to talk a little bit about Texas for a minute. Ed, Governor Greg Abbott, as you know, he has this policy. He's busing migrants to New York City. He's sending several to Washington, D.C. And all of this has raised the level of rhetoric between the mayors of those cities and the governor. They're all going at it right now. Governor Abbott says he's doing this because the Biden administration isn't doing anything about securing the southern border. Do you think Congress is paying attention to any of this, or is this solely between the mayors of these cities and our governor down here in Texas?
They may be paying attention, but there won't be anything substantive done on immigration reform until at least early next year, when we know who exactly is in charge of Congress and what other issues they may have to consider. We have yet to see, for example, congressional Republicans lay out a specific plan to address the issue, other than to say they'd like to resume President Trump's plan to build a border wall. We have yet to see a serious Democratic proposal from the White House or from congressional Democrats move forward at all. But I think ultimately both parties understand this is an issue that at some point soon must be addressed and has to be addressed in a bipartisan way. It's just a question of when is the right moment and who would be in charge of Congress to make that happen.
Ed O'Keefe, always a pleasure chatting with you, my friend, and getting the insights from you from Washington. Thank you so much for joining us. And of course, be sure to check out more political reporting on the CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell. That'll be right here on CBS 11 at 5:30.